So this particular video covers how to target specific communities. So when I say communities, it could be, for example, a literal community, or could be a very specific profession. I think we'll just try to refer it as a generally specific profession from this point onwards. One of the things that you need to be very proficient at is the branding and the content under which you are doing certain things. I would say that the branding is slightly more important in this particular manner, right? The beginning of how you're able to target a specific community for prospecting, okay, is to ensure that your brand lines up with it. Yeah. So why would people want to do this as a prospecting activity? It's obviously because some people like to serve certain groups of people more than others. So for example, myself personally, I used to think that I would love to serve teachers. It turns out that I was wrong. Even though I have 8 years of teaching experience before I even started consultancy, it turns out that teachers don't like me and I don't like them very much. That's because I know how difficult it was to be a teacher and how difficult it is to be successful as a teacher, and so that is why I am not a teacher, right? I'm a coach, or I was a consultant. Okay, but for the most part, teachers do have very, very rigorous hours. They tend to be slightly more moody and irritable, which is definitely things that I remember being. And so even though they do have largely iron rice bowls, but increasingly more of them are leaving the public service industry. So my point is that sometimes the market that you want is not the market that you're going to get. And so the reason why you want to learn how to target specific social groups, social communities, is because you want to kind of find your own people, find the people which you get along best with. So after a while, it turns out that I learned that software engineers like me. And that's weird because I am very, very poor at tech. Even right now, as we are filming this video, I have no idea how to use the camera of which this video is being filmed by. Right, which means that I have no idea how to actually operate a camera, which is we're making this video with. Right, it's pretty difficult for me because I'm not a very tech-oriented person. Software engineers tend to be extremely tech-oriented, but the reason why software engineers tend to like me is because I do like to speak from a very, very logical, numerical point of view. I like to be very, very transparent about the programming of the product in some sense, and they do generally like my very straightforward attitude and quick to the point business discussions, because software engineers typically are responsible for fixing very, very specific bugs in specific programs, and so they don't like to beat around the bush. They have to kill it out. They're basically jockeys in that sense, and so they do tend to like working with me. And so it has been important for me to figure out how I can continue to work with this particular group, right? So the branding which you do will normally tell people who you like to work with. And so branding, for example, there are some people which will say, I am XYZ person and I like to help teachers and community service leaders, right? And the reason why I do that is because maybe they can scroll down your branding and they can see that, it turns out that I have a background in these things. I have huge empathy for children and for victims of abuse and so on and so forth, right? And so that's why I like to work with occupations that support these things, which I feel very strongly about, and so your branding can be very solidified in these areas. For someone like myself, I like people who are extremely technical and to the point, people who enjoy a straight shooter, people who are intelligent enough to grasp the things that I'm saying, which I'm saying very quickly, and they should snap, get it immediately. And so I find that software engineers and sometimes lawyers tend to like me more than the majority of other professions. And so I could say that this is something that I like to explore, right? Now, you may have come across people who will say things like, I work with high net worth professionals, or like mass affluent market. I do say some of these things from time to time. It's certainly been in my bio before. I do take some pride in knowing that this is actually the group that I work with. The problem with that is that it can be too generalized, right? Which means that it doesn't make sense for you to be able to do that unless you hit a certain level of proficiency. And so if you only have 1 or 2 clients in this category and you like to say that this is the case, no one is going to believe you until you achieve a certain level of success, because it's just too broad already. Most people are not able to do a level of consultancy at the same level as a doctor as they would someone who is, for example, maybe the director of a small company. Both are high-level professionals, but one is a franchisee, or basically he is self-employed. One is basically a director. He's in a very, very high-paying employment-based job, right? And so even though they're both high-level, mass affluent professionals, the market is very different, and how they deal with you and how they look at you can be very, very different. How you consult them is going to be very different, and as a result, it is not very likely that it is believable that you are able to handle all this kind of clientele, and so the branding will start to fall apart after that, right? So one of the things that you want to do is firstly establish what kind of profession you like to work with. Perhaps you can go and look at your existing pool of clients and see if who you like the most or who likes you the most, right? Which is not the same thing. Basically, who likes you the most is probably what kind of market you should go for. Not so much who you like the most. People who you like may not buy from you. People who like you will probably buy from you, right? And so you want to kind of establish where your market is in that particular area. Then the second thing you want to do is just go and establish as much research as you can in this particular area, which means, for example, if I am prospecting to teachers, right? Do I know the number of hours which they're working? Do I know how they maintain social relationships? Do I know when their bonuses come out? Or what their plan is after teaching, right? Because these are some major factors. So I use teaching as an example here. So some of the research for teachers have demonstrated that, okay, well, teachers typically go through NIE. They will go for a 3-on-3-year course or 4-on-4-year course, which means that they go for 3 years in studying, then 3 years on a bond, or they'll go for 4 years studying, 4 years on a bond. First of all, a total bond of 6 or 8 years. Yeah, that means that they're bonded to the government. They have some payments for perhaps sticking it out, but for the most part, they are forced to work to a certain degree, right? Okay. The second thing to kind of keep in mind, so the social thing, right? So for example, how do teachers get attached, right? So in today's world, for the most part, pretty interesting, teachers used to get attached to, for example, other teachers, right? Or they used to get attached to their university sweethearts. Very rarely was it anything else. Yeah, and so if you get attached to another teacher, usually there's a bit of conflict of interest, which means that if you want to continue on the relationship, one of you has to go to another school, right? And that's pretty interesting, right? So if you're interested in that kind of relationship, usually it's pretty hard to do. Otherwise, for the most part, the reason why I'm speaking about this is that if you understand the nature of the profession, you'll find that it's very, very hard for teachers to meet other people, right? Generally, it's very, very hard. And so nowadays, that was the old days. Nowadays, you have some kind of social media, which means that basically teachers can go onto Tinder and then maybe they will try to find a partner from there or some other matchmaking platform, right? And now, why is knowing some of this stuff relevant? It's because you want to be able to determine how to speak to your clientele, which means that you want to know that from a psychological profile, especially if they're male, for example, most of these teachers have either been in a longer term relationship with their university sweetheart, so maybe their girlfriend not married yet, or they're single, or they're married already to whoever there was while they were in the teaching profession. Very rarely is it outside of this particular scope, and so you can have a certain idea revolving around the best kind of or most appropriate financial products for their particular situation, right? Most teachers are in civil servants, or means that the majority of teachers that you speak to, if they tell you they're a teacher, the majority of them are in public, not private, right? And so they have a very predictable amount of salary as well as bonuses. It can be interesting for you to go and ask them questions if you don't know already. So research aside, you can also ask them questions about things like how they get promoted to positions of HOD, their KPIs, so on and so forth, what their career progression looks like. There are many teachers increasingly today that are looking to finish their contract and use the power of their training and their credibility to get out and move into private teaching. So that's also a very, very common occurrence. And so the general idea behind this point is that I'm using this example for teaching. I'm not trying to tell you that you should go and approach teachers. I am pointing out that if you want a specific market, which you know has high value, right? Ultimately, I learned about some of this stuff because teachers are still a reasonably high value market. Most of them are paid really well, whether it's public or private. Most of them are very, very good at what they do. Most of them have stable jobs or they're passionate about education. Otherwise, they probably would not last very long as teachers. Education in Singapore is not likely to go away anytime soon, which means that they are likely to either have very stable careers or very, very increasingly lucrative careers, for example, right? Even with some of the social aspects that may hurt them, right? And so the idea here is that if you find that you are in a market which is very appealing to a lot of people, then go and conduct research on that market so you can go and do better in relation to approaching them as a community, right? So once you've conducted a lot of this research, you'll find that you're able to open up cases because, for example, for teachers where I knew when their bonuses were paid out, I was able to go and justify, okay, listen, well, I think the government's going to pay out a higher bonus because now things are slightly better, right? Or how is your job doing? If you're telling me that you're doing well at your job and you did this thing, that thing, that thing, then I know that your bonus should be reasonably amount as much, right? And so I would say something like, okay, well, if your bonus happens to be good, how about we look at this, right? Because I have prepped them on the basis that firstly, I know your profession very well. Secondly, I'm asking you to do something that is not guaranteed, which means that if the bonus is not very good, then you don't have to try to do this with me. But if the bonus is very good, then how about we agree that we should talk about the possibility of this particular product, right? And so that is something that is a non-committal approach, which means that the teacher doesn't feel that they have to commit any particular thing, like from a financial standpoint, but they also recognize that you are proficient in what you do from a job perspective, right? You're just offering them a reasonable business proposition while having a very clear idea of what they do professionally. So if you want to reach a very specific community, the research is extremely important. Once you have the research tied down and you have certain clients which are in this particular area, you want to firstly, of course, ask questions to reinforce some of your knowledge in this area, but to go and begin the referral process for them to speak to their colleagues. So again, using teaching as an example, many teachers tend to have large group chats in relation to, for example, if they have worked on a project together, like let's say if you have teachers that are trying to do like this CCA-based project, like maybe 3 or 5 of them have to go and organize students together to put a play, right, to put a play together, then they have a group chat for that. Some of them are in the same CCA, so they'll have a group chat for that. Some of them will have a subject-based group chat, like they all teach math, right? And so they have a group chat for that, right? And so you would be able to understand how to reach out to, you basically have an idea from your prospects on how they can reach out to their other prospects. Basically try to ask them a little bit about the relationships over there, who they're closer to, etc., and who they'll be willing to speak to, right? And leverage the fact that you're looking at this market and you have a lot of knowledge of this market. So if you have a client, very good. If you don't have, still okay, because you have the research, which means that you can go and approach this group very organically, telling them that you specialize in this particular area and that you understand a lot of their needs and you served a lot of teachers before. So even if you haven't done that, it would sound like you have, because you've conducted the majority of the research that makes them feel that you know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to how they feel about their job. So on a very personal level, you know how they feel. On a very professional level in relation to their finances, you also know how to best serve them. Yeah, and so this can be applied for any vocation, whether or not it's like doctors, lawyers, bartenders. I don't know. I'm not thinking about a lot of professions off the top of my head. But the general idea is there. A very organic approach to do that would be, for example, if you are able to find somebody on LinkedIn. It means that you can Google typically LinkedIn people. Like for example, if I want to find a teacher, I can go Google NIE. If I want to target a certain school, for example, maybe I can go and message my old secondary school and say, hey, I'm an alumni. I'd like to come back and give a talk if you guys would like, right? Because frankly speaking, secondary school teachers, which are supposed to be responsible for putting assemblies together, they are always looking for people to go and occupy some of the assembly time with distinguished speakers, right? And so you're doing them a favor if you tell them that, hey, I'd like to come down and go and give a talk to your school for free. And then you can give some cute little talk to the students, which could be beneficial for them, but it's mostly so that the teachers can get to know you as well, right? That kind of thing. So there's so many things that you can do once you have the knowledge of the profession.